Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Every Day is Saturday. I'm Matt Stahl. Here's my partner, Brad Gatto. And today we are going to continue our series of our book review of The Psychology of Money.
Boom. I love these episodes.
Boom.
I always get excited about these episodes. My posture is better than yours, so I look way taller than you.
I was just going to adjust in a second. Right. I was getting situated. You do look way taller than me. Today we are covering chapter 5 of this book, which is Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy.
That's the exciting part. The non-exciting part is after today, that means we're 25% done because there's 20 chapters in this book.
I know that now because you quizzed me on that last time. And
yep.
I will not forget that.
I like this book. We're going to find some other book to do this with.
We do.
Not mine.
I have an idea.
Nope. We're not doing this with my book. That's like staring at yourself in the mirror and having other people go, being able to like critique you.
It's a celebration.
Anyway, we have a long ways before we have to worry about that. But we are 25% of the way through chapter 5 today. But before we dive in, Matt, how's your world? How's your life?
My world is good.
What's new?
So I feel like there's this recurring theme. I'm pretty sure everyone's aware that winter is not your favorite season.
I've never said that.
You make it pretty well known.
Yep.
And I tend to say that there's parts about winter that I do enjoy. I think definitely a little bit more than you do.
Mm-hmm.
However,
this is groundbreaking information so far.
I just want to see the sun.
Yeah.
I'm struggling a bit with that. So all the sports are played inside right now. We do get outside for snowboarding, but it's been under clouds. So it's been uninspiring.
Maybe you should get a tanning bed.
Maybe. Sounds like a great place.
There's a deep, dark secret of mine. I love tanning beds. I've not been in a tanning bed in a long time. Probably since, in my adult life, I've probably only been in a tanning bed. I can count on one hand, even if I was missing a couple fingers. So I'm not saying I actually do it. I'm just saying I love it.
You really do. Oh, great gift idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great place to take a nap because I hate being cold and I'm always cold. My hands are always cold. My feet are always cold. I must have some sort of disease.
Raynaud's.
Yeah, I think I have it. But the tanning bed is like the ultimate place to take a nap. Assuming you don't go too long.
Aside from dreaming about tanning beds, how about you? What's new in your world?
Well, I can't focus on anything else. Everything's good, man. I was just telling you before we started this recording that my little guy, Hudson, is 9 years old. And for the second time in his life, he broke his wrist. Now, the first time he broke his wrist was when he was 2, and it was his left hand. And fun fact, I was super excited. I'm left-handed. I was super excited because, at 2, you don't really know if your kid's left-handed or right-handed. But it was definitely leaning heavily towards left-handed, like doing most things left-handed. And then he broke his left wrist, was in a cast, and started using his right hand for everything at 2 years old, obviously, because he just, when you're 2, you don't complain about life. You just kind of, you just roll the punches. Yeah. And to this day, he's right-handed. And so I always blame it on the fact that he broke his left wrist because I was dead convinced at that point. And maybe I was wrong, but I was convinced he was left-handed. So now he broke his right wrist. Same exact bone, same break, same, it literally is a mirrored image of what he did 7 years ago. And I'm really hoping
that he
goes back. He went to his first couple of days of school. He did it at the end of the week last week. And then he went to school, it's Wednesday as we record this. So he's had 3 days of school. Today's his 3rd day, but the first 2 days, he always plays football at recess with his buddies, and he didn't know what he was going to do. So they allowed him to be all-time QB. Nobody can touch Hudson. That was the rule. But of course, he had to throw with his left hand, and he's like, I'm actually pretty good with my left hand, Dad. Now, part of that could be he's 9 years old and he's way too overconfident about his abilities, but I'm optimistic. So very long way to get to. That's what's new in my world is I got a kid with a broken arm.
Who's going to become left-handed?
That's the hope, or at least ambidextrous. See, I'm left-handed. I'm less ambidextrous than 99.99% of the population. Most left-handed people you have a higher likelihood of being ambidextrous if you're left-handed than you do right-handed. Like that's kind of one of these weird things. Not me. My right hand, it might as well be like, I might as well just cut it off and use it as a club. That's how not useful it is. I can't do anything right-handed. I don't kick right-handed or right-footed. That would be, my dominant eye, the way I shoot pool, golf, all of it's left-handed. So, or left-footed.
All of those soccer games that you Pickup soccer games you play.
There's been a disproportionate amount of presidents that are left-handed. That's what I hang my hat on.
Oh, there you go.
Not that I would ever want to be president of the United States. Sounds like the worst job.
It does.
Although at least you have the Secret Service now.
That's true.
You used to not have the Secret Service and people used to pick you off all the time. So that's the one perk. You got the Secret Service. Anyway, let's get into this book, man.
Let's do it.
All right. Chapter 5 is called Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. Which one's harder? Let's get into it and let's figure it out.
Let's do it.
The subtitle here, which I like, is good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. This is also a book about marriage advice
and many other things.
Consistently not screwing up.
All right. So to get started, we're gonna play a little game here.
Yep.
So we're gonna go into character. Brad, you're gonna go first.
Oh, you're going first.
I'm gonna go first. Okay.
Yeah, yours is a shorter character story. You got the B roll.
I got the B roll. Come on. B. All right. So my name is Abraham Jermansky. Picture me.
Your name is Abraham? Do you go by Abraham?
Abe.
Okay, you go by Abe.
I go by Abe.
All right,
call me Abe. So I'm a multi-million-dollar real estate developer.
Ooh.
Made all my money during the roaring 20s.
Oh, so the setting is what year?
The particular year is 1929.
It's 1929. Your name is Abe. You're a real estate guy. Got it.
And I'm uber rich.
You're uber rich.
Yes, I'm in New York. So
Uber hasn't been invented yet.
I'm super rich. Walking down the street, I'm wearing my fur coat.
Okay.
Probably have I have a fancy hat on.
Yep.
My fancy boots on, and I think I'm doing pretty well.
You're living your best life.
My head is swollen.
Yep.
Living my best life. So I'm making all this money. What's my next logical step? Well, at that point in time, just like everyone else, all my other friends, I'm going to bet it all on the stock market. So I'm going to put it all on the stock market. And
all right,
it doesn't turn out for me so hot. So as the market crashed.
Wait a minute, the market crashed in 1929?
Yeah. You should read up on it. The October 1929, the market crashes and I lose it all. And
worst week in the market ever.
Yep. And unfortunately, I don't see many options out and I choose the dirt nap.
The dirt nap. Well, let's be fair. Abe was never found.
That's true. Likely I chose.
Likely. So very commonplace at this point in time in October, in the fall of 1929, when the worst week in the market ever, that a lot of people on Wall Street committed suicide, took their lives.
Yeah.
And one of the characters that's mentioned in this book is Abe. And he's a very, very successful real estate guy. And unfortunately, that was the end of his story. So now I'm going to play my character. So my name is not Abe. My name is Jesse Livermore, to be exact. And I am, at this point in time, it's October 1929. I also am on Wall Street, but I actually started making my money early. So years ago, I was born in 1877. I'm 52 at this time. But by the time I was 30 years old, I was known as one of the greatest stock market traders. And I was worth, inflation adjusted, like today, over $100 million by the time I was in my 30s. And so now fast forward, I'm now 52 years old. It's 1929. And the stock market comes crumbling down. And I'm on my way home. I get home and I realize that my wife and kids are there. And my mom is actually at my house and they're paranoid because they assume that, like everybody else that was in the market, that I just completely lost my fortune, just like Abe.
Yep.
Right. And so they're actually fearful of me coming home. And when I get home, my wife is questioning me and she's like, "Hey, are you okay?" Making sure, because the word has gotten out that the suicide on the numbers of people taking their own life on Wall Street is staggering. And so she's just happy I'm home, but really distraught over my mental state. And I inform her that actually, you know what? We're just fine. Not only did I not lose any money, I actually shorted the stock market recently. And my net worth, our net worth, went from 100 million, inflation adjusted, to $3 billion with a B.
Wow, Jesse.
That is, yeah. That's a pat on the back to your husband type of day if I've ever heard of one. His net worth went up 2,900%. basically overnight. So two gentlemen who had achieved this whole idea of getting wealthy, because that's what we're talking about here, getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Both of them had gotten wealthy at this point by October of 1929. But at that point in the story, they diverge, right? And you have Abe, who lost all of his wealth in the stock market. And then you've got Jesse, who actually shorted the market and not only stayed wealthy at that point, but his net worth went up 2,900% in a very, very short amount of time. But that's unfortunately not
where you came up with this idea, because you picked the high flying, like, geez.
Well, unfortunately, I actually only got 4 more years than you did.
Oh,
because that's not the end of Jesse's story. Although he was able to stave off 1929 and he was able to quote unquote stay wealthy through the height of the Great Depression, he got a little full of himself. And and in that moment, he was like, you know what? I'm a genius. Not only did I make all this money in the markets,
called it.
And then he basically kind of called what was going on and shorted the markets. What he ended up doing was kind of increasing his bets and getting even more risky than he was before. And unfortunately, by 1933, through all of his speculation, not only had he lost everything, but he had incurred a ton of debt through margin trading. And by 1933, Jesse actually suffered the exact same fate as Mr. Abe and ended up taking his own life.
Wowzers.
Inflation adjusted $3 billion.
That is crazy.
That's insane. And to not only achieve that, but then to lose it all in 4 years. We always hear the stories about the lottery winners. Yeah. And now these lottery numbers are getting insane too, by the way. Like over $1 billion if you win the lottery.
That's crazy.
Isn't it? Or is it 100 million?
I don't know. I don't pay much attention to the lottery.
Or is it over? No, it's over $1 billion. Like some of these lotteries are getting over $1 billion. I mean, now obviously once they take out taxes and you don't take the annuity payment, you take the lump sum, it equates to a lot less than that. But it's still hundreds of millions of dollars after the fact. And the statistics around people that maintain that wealth, getting wealthy versus staying wealthy, are not good. We'll just say they're not good.
They're not good.
Yeah, they're not in your favor. So to be worth $3 billion and end up having to take your own life because not only have you lost all of it, but you're actually in the hole. It's just crazy.
So what's the one thing we both have in common? Jesse,
we got wealthy.
Abe, we were both very good at getting wealthy.
Yep.
We were both very poor at staying wealthy.
And that's the point of this chapter is that getting wealthy is hard. Staying wealthy, harder.
Even harder.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people that will never get wealthy, unfortunately. And so they'll never actually be able to climb that mountain, so to speak. And maybe if you're listening to this podcast, maybe you're one of those people. Now, it depends on how you define wealthy, because in America, most people are wealthy relative to world standards. Right. But being able to stay there and maintain that and do it not only in a financial way where by numbers you're wealthy, but also that mentally you're still wealthy and that it isn't driving you insane with this money is vitally important. So what we're going to talk about in this book are some of the things that we can, or this chapter rather, are some of the things we can do to not just get wealthy, but stay wealthy.
Yeah. One thing we talked about is what's something you say when we have a new client come in that they're transitioning to retirement. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
The whole won the game part?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the 16 years that I've been in this industry, and now really the last handful of years, really specializing in this area of helping people on the descent, the people that are just now retiring or nearing retirement, we meet a lot of people, Matt, that they have enough. Like if you just run very conservative estimates and kind of fast forward their life and look at projections and cash flows and things like that, the amount of money that they have, regardless of any gains in markets or otherwise, they have enough. And so we have the conversations of you could take all of your money out of the markets, bury it in a Folgers can in the backyard, and just go out every single month and take out how much you need to live, and you would never run out of money. And so one of the phrases we use all the time is you've won the game. And so I always think, I don't know why, of all the games, why my head goes to Candyland. But it does. That's what I think of.
Not even Monopoly.
My kids hate playing Monopoly with me. I'm really good at Monopoly, just so you know. But that's also because I play it the right way, right? You don't put random money in free parking. If nobody buys the property, you auction it off. We're
gonna have a whole episode on this.
Yeah, but I think of Candyland, and I don't know why I think of Candyland, but that's probably because it's the most frustrating game to me because my 9-year-old's super competitive, and Candyland is a complete luck game. There's no skill in Candyland. You draw a card and you move that many spaces, and there's certain, pieces of candy that project you forward. And then there's other ones that, when you get that same piece of candy, literally the same piece of candy that could propel you forward in the early parts of the game, drags you back in a later part of the game. And it's vitally frustrating, especially when you get to the end of the deck and you have to reshuffle the cards. So that piece of candy got put back in there and there's a chance that you could draw it again. I'd hate that game. So that's why I always think of that game when I'm like, you won the game. Stop playing Candyland. Don't get to the end and draw another card because it could be that stupid little sucker at the beginning, or the little peppermint that's at the beginning of the board. You don't want to do that. So all that to say, you've won the game. Stop playing the game, or play the game differently.
Yep. I like this phrase. I think it describes kind of that transition from the ascent to the descent.
Yep.
Is getting money requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But keeping money requires the opposite of taking risk. It requires humility and fear that what you've made can be taken from you just as fast.
Yeah.
That kind of sets the table for
some combination of frugality and paranoia.
Yep.
Is another way that he phrases it in this chapter. Yeah, we talk about that analogy all the time about this transition from the ascent to the descent. In fact, in the public workshop that we do on taxes, we play that clip from Seinfeld where George talks about the opposite, how you have to do everything the opposite. And getting wealthy and staying wealthy, it is no different. In a lot of ways, you have to do things the opposite to stay wealthy that you did to get wealthy.
Which is even more difficult because that's how you got there in the first place.
Exactly. Right? Now, that's not how you stay here, but that's just how you got here. Some combination of frugality and paranoia. So he goes on in here to give another example. So we'll give one more anecdotal story here, and then we'll go to kind of the 3 key points as Morgan in the book Psychology of Money points out of how to balance this frugality and paranoia. But One more anecdotal story, Matt, kick us off.
Yeah. So we've talked about Warren Buffett a few times in this book. My guess is we'll talk about him a few more times.
Yep.
Very good example of a lot of the concepts that we talk about in here. He goes on to say, we could study Warren Buffett all day long. There's a handful of things that he has done and has not done. A lot of them are very simple. But what very few people know is, so a lot of people have heard of Charlie Munger. That's Warren's partner, counterpart. Doesn't get quite as much attention, but most people know who Charlie Munger is. There's actually a third member of that crew as well.
What?
Yeah.
Mind blown.
You know what that guy's name was?
You know what's funny is I've read the book and we just reread the chapter in preparation for this, and I already don't remember.
His name was Rick Guerin, I believe is how we pronounce that.
You don't know how to pronounce his last name?
Guerin.
That just proves the point.
I'm going to go with Guerin.
Why have we never heard of him, Matt?
So we've never heard of Rick because, to quote Warren, so Rick, Charlie, and Warren started off together. They all had the sense that they were going to become very wealthy, but the way Warren explains it is Charlie and Warren had patience. So they didn't expect to become wealthy very fast, as opposed to Rick, who he was in a hurry. So Rick took excessive risks, again, got into the margin business and ended up getting in a spot where he had to sell his shares at a price that was not in his favor. Let's put it that way.
Well, let's just read what it says here because it's great. It says, what happened was that in 73, 74 downturn, Rick was levered with margin loans and the stock market went down almost 70% in those 2 years. So he got margin calls that he couldn't fulfill. So he sold his Berkshire stock to Warren. Warren actually said, I bought Rick's Berkshire stock at under $40. And he was forced to sell because he was levered.
So they were all equally skilled at getting rich.
Yep.
Definitely not equally skilled at staying rich.
Yeah, I just love the dichotomy because it just fits so well with the conversations we're having all the time. Because again, by the world's standards, most of the families we work with, because, we really specialize in this area of what I would call, blue collar, amazing people. Mm-hmm. We're not working typically with the upper echelon, super high net worth, 100 million plus type families. And you meet somebody that's, 62-year-old widowed woman, and she's got $1.2 million of investable assets, and she would never consider herself wealthy. But again, by world standards, absolutely true.
Right.
And at that point of her life has done a wonderful job of getting wealthy. But the point that Morgan's making in this chapter that we're going to continue to flesh out here is that's hard. It is hard to get wealthy. And I don't want to take anything away from that. It's hard to climb the mountain. But his point is it's even harder to come back down the other side.
Yeah.
And to stay wealthy.
So he transitions to going through 3 big points.
Yep.
So talking about this concept of survival. So as opposed to the growth side, this becomes way more survival. And the survival mindset comes down to 3 things. So I'm going to read that first point. And it's more than I want big returns. I want to be financially unbreakable. And if I'm unbreakable, I actually think I'll get the biggest returns because I'll be able to stick around long enough for compounding to work wonders. We talked about this a lot in the compounding chapter,
yep.
But the phrase I want to pull out of here the most is compounding doesn't rely on earning big returns, merely good returns sustained uninterrupted for the longest period of time, especially in times of chaos and havoc.
Yep.
Will always win.
So how in the world do you do that, Matt?
How in the world do you do that? So we've talked about this a lot, but this does come down to having some sort of plan. And if you break this down into a personal financial planning structure, it's number one, it's understanding where you're spending your money and how much. We can't really figure anything else out without that, right?
Yeah.
And once we have a grasp on that, then it's staying disciplined to our cash. So let's ensure that we have a safe source of income as we transition to that descent, something that we're not dependent upon where when that havoc and the chaos and the havoc is going on around us, we have the peace of mind to know that we had the discipline to do something where we have some sort of guarantee or some sort of
safety
income. Yeah. Margin of safety is a word that Morgan uses a lot.
Yeah, which is great. We'll unpack margin of safety here a little more in just a little bit when we get to the next point. But one of the things that we do practically to achieve this goal of more than I want big returns, I want to be financially unbreakable. How do you become unbreakable? How do you make sure that when the proverbial, hits the fan? Because that happens. And we're actually going to give some numbers how often that happens in just a minute here. But it does happen. In fact, it just happened last year. And we're going to do another podcast episode here. Actually, I think the next recording is going to be on this, what happened last year. It was a crazy year. There's a lot of statistics about last year that are bonkers. So make sure you turn into that episode because it's an outlier of a year. But that said, how do you make sure you're unbreakable? Well, you need some fundamental things to be a part of your plan. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot with families is we need foundational planning done, foundational cash flow, foundational income. And so the simplest example of that is cash. Right? You shouldn't invest all of your money. And so from a planning perspective, one of the principles that we stick to is that if you're retired and you have $60,000 a year of Social Security coming in the door and you need $80,000 to live, you have that $20,000 delta or bogey there that you need to fulfill. Well, over a 2-year period, that's $40,000. We always tell families you need 1 to 2 years of cash on hand at all times because there's such volatility in short-term markets over a 12 or 24-month period that anything outside of cash is just taking on more risk than we need to. Right? And so it could be something as simple as just having a good plan in place for how much cash you should have on hand relative to your family situation. And then the next step of that would be creating a paycheck where we know what percentages of that paycheck are coming from sources that aren't subject to volatility of markets or economies or anything else like that, or global pandemics, and then having sources of income that aren't, but making sure we understand the relationship between those two. And that the analogy I use all the time is the big bad wolf, that we've built our house out of bricks. Yep. And so the problem is that's boring stuff.
Right. Especially when all your friends are talking about how.
Well, yeah. And 2022 is on the back of a 12-year run in the market where the S&P is up over 500%. Right. And it starts to become really, really fun. You start to become Jesse and Livermore, and you went from $100 million inflation adjusted net worth to $3 billion because you made one good move. And all of a sudden you get a little cocky and you're like, this is fine. I can take these risks. And you think that you're comfortable with those risks. And then things pull back and you realize, in fact, you're not. And not only that, but your plan couldn't sustain it or afford it or what have you. So it goes back to that statement we made earlier of you've won the game. So once you've won the game, how do you ensure that you don't pull the peppermint out of the stack of cards, Candyland? I have nightmares about that.
Yeah.
All right. Point number 2. Anything else you want to say on that before I've just kind of pushed us on here?
No, I think that,
all right,
that
nailed
covers it. I think
we did it.
There's an example he gives. I think that example we gave covers it.
Number 2, planning is important, but the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan not going according to plan.
Peter Piper picked it.
That always makes me think of there's a section in the Bible where Paul's like, why do I always do what I do not want to do? But the things I do want to do, I don't do. And the things I don't want to do, I do. And it was one of the first pieces I read in public. And that's what it reminds me. Part of every plan is the plan on the plan, not going according to plan. So to tie that into Paul's words, you plan, God laughs.
Yes, that's right. And that's actually how Morgan tees us all up. So the saying, you plan, God laughs. This really comes down to, we all know that we have the conversation frequently with clients when we're sitting down. There's no such thing as financial planning being a one and done thing, right? So there's so many moving parts. There's so many compounding things going on at the same time that
whoa. Cut. We got to cut that out.
We know for certain that what it says on paper is not going to be that case.
Yeah.
And the further you zoom in on shorter periods of time, the more clear that becomes. And so we often talk about what are the things that we can do where we can create a little bit more certainty for ourselves.
Wiggle.
So
I always like to tell people, the only thing I can guarantee you is that everything we talked about is wrong. It's funny, but it's true.
It is true.
Right? Yeah. Plan A never happens. It just never happens. He says here in this book, and this will tee you up for what I know you're going to say, is a plan is only useful if it can survive reality, and a future filled with unknowns is everyone's reality.
Right.
So practical steps. What can we do? One
great example of this is the tax side of things. So
we don't ever talk about taxes.
We know nothing about it.
That's one unknown. So you're going to pay some taxes.
Yes.
That's a known.
When we dig into taxes, and if you watch our workshop or you've been through the planning process, you'll know there's a certain set of facts that we know right now. And none of us knows for certain what's going to happen in the future. We can look at all sorts of different likely outcomes. But if we can build into our plan, and a perfect example of this would be on the tax planning side of things. If I want to create more freedom, is the word that I'll often use, that involves creating a plan where we get more money into an area where we know we're not going to pay taxes down the road, right? So that could be a Roth IRA conversion. We can dig into this and start asking all the questions of, well, what if this happens? What if tax policy changes? Or what if that? When you really boil it down, it doesn't matter. It's what's going to create the most freedom for us down the road, where if we decide that we want to go on a large vacation, take our whole family somewhere, or go buy a home, the one fact that we know is if we have that money accessible somewhere where it's not subject to what's going on with the market or taxes or whatever it may be, that's going to create a lot more freedom and options for us down the road. So that's one real world example of that.
Yeah, I think another way we do this, and this is more global than the specific example that you gave, is Morgan in his book would define this as margin of safety, which he says in your definition is raising the odds of success at a given level of risk by increasing your chances of survival. Because again, going back to the beginning of this, how do you stay rich? Well, it takes this combination, you have to survive. It takes this combination of frugality and paranoia. One of the things that we do is, some people call it conservative. We'd be very conservative in our assumptions. But for us, this is just that margin of safety that Morgan talked about. And so when we look into the future, we'll do things like we'll only assume a 4% rate of return. We'll assume higher rates of inflation. We'll assume that Social Security isn't going to give very good cost of living adjustments. We'll assume a lot of things like that to basically stress test the plan overall and make sure that we have margin of safety. And going back to what we talked about before, making sure you have enough cash on hand for the first couple of years of spending needs in between your guaranteed sources of income and the amount of lifestyle that you actually want to live, or making sure that the income coming in the door is guaranteed through pension, Social Security, and other sources. Those are all areas where we build in margin of safety. And it's just so important to understand it's not about being conservative and giving up on growth, or, not taking advantage of markets and our economy, which has gone up exponentially over time. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with staying wealthy. And it's just a different mindset on the way down the mountain.
Right. I like how he defines this. Conservative is avoiding a certain level of risk. Margin of safety is raising the odds of success at a given level of risk by increasing your chances of survival. That's a good way to put it.
That's a mic drop right there. So, on to point number 3.
Boom. Point number 3. A barbelled personality, optimistic about the future, but paranoid about what will prevent you from getting to the future is vital. He uses a word to describe this. We had our own word. He says sensible optimism. We both kind of agreed rational optimism.
Yep.
Is kind of where that. And I think this translates to so many different things. In here, he says you can be optimistic about the long-term growth trajectory is up and to the right. So it's something we talk about often. But if you don't assume that there's going to be all sorts of landmines along the way, then you are wrong.
Yeah. One of the quotes he makes in here is about, it says, going back to Jesse and making a comment about Jesse, the gentleman that kind of won during 1929, but then lost it all 4 years later, is he associated the good times with the end of bad times. And unfortunately, that's not how that works. And so we all look at the outcomes that we want, but are we willing to go through the things and kind of the crap, which is not a very professional term, right? But it's true, to get there.
Right.
Because we know that there's going to be bumps along the road. You're not going to be on plan A to get to that outcome. If you want that outcome, that's great. And we can set the course that in any reasonable future, I always use the phrase, if you grant me that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, with any reasonable future that you're going to get to that outcome. But that does not mean that along the way, we're not going to hit bumps and bruises, which is a great, lead into the next episode, which is going to be kind of a discussion of 2022 and what happened in the markets. It's a bump in the road. It's a massive bump in the road. But he talks in here about our economy, and over the last 170 years, like what our economy has done and how much our economy has grown, and the fact that over the last 170 years in our country, I mean, think of 170 years ago, right? The middle of the 1800s, President Lincoln, there's still slavery. Like it's not anywhere close to what it is today in a very short amount of time, relatively speaking, for humanity. The standard of living in this country has increased 20-fold. 20.
Say that again.
20-fold. The standard of living in this country over the last 170 years has increased 20-fold. Now, that is an outcome that everybody would be like, well, that's awesome. Yeah, I'd be down for that outcome. I love the end of that rainbow. But in between the middle of the 1800s through today, 1.3 million Americans died while fighting 9 major wars. 99.9%, roughly. I love that. Roughly 99.9% of all companies that were created went out of business. 4 U.S. presidents were assassinated. 675,000 Americans died in a single year from one flu pandemic. 30 separate natural disasters killed at least 400 Americans. 33 different recessions in the stock market, accumulating to 48 total years of recessive markets. The number of forecasters who predicted any of these recessions rounds down to basically zero. The stock market fell more than 10% from a recent high at least 102 times. Stocks lost a third of their value at least 12 times, 1/3 of their value at least 12 times. Annual inflation exceeded 7% in 20 different years. And the words economic pessimism appeared in newspapers at least 29,000 times. Yet the end of that rainbow, Matt, is our economy exploded, and the average American saw their standard of living increase by 20 times. And we talked about compounding in the last episode where we talked about this book. This isn't 20, plus. It's not pluses, it's times, 20 times their standard of living than 170 years ago. Good times, by definition, are not the end of bad times.
Yep. I think
so. How do you stay wealthy?
Just going back to what you just ran through, I think that translates to so many other things than just getting wealthy and staying wealthy as well.
Yeah.
We talk about that. Anyone that has any sort of success or anything, there's going to be those landmines along the way.
Yeah.
Right. So I like how he describes this. This is a quote from Jess, our friend Jesse. So I sometimes think that no price is too high for a speculator to pay to learn that which will keep him from getting the swelled head. I think we should bring that phrase back.
Swelled head.
A great many smashes by brilliant men can be traced directly to the swelled head.
Yeah.
It's an expensive disease.
It is a very expensive disease.
Everywhere to everybody.
Yeah. The bottom line is this. In this chapter, this is a wonderful chapter. It's where Morgan talks a lot about this margin of safety. And as I originally read this book, before we started doing this podcast on this book, the margin of safety of all the concepts in the book, it was one of the things I resonated with the most, because although it was something we were already doing, I didn't have the correct language for it or the phraseology for it. And so, because going conservative and being conservative, especially for people that have been successful in the past relative to some of the risks that they've taken, seems like a step back, or it seems like a negative thing. When in reality, margin of safety is not that at all. And it's just important for people to understand different phases of life. And it's great to become wealthy. But unlike the third partner, whose name I've already forgotten again,
Rick.
Let's go between Warren and Charlie. It's just so important to make rational decisions and make sure you've got margin of safety built in, and not get a disease of having a big head.
The swelled head.
Something else that's changed in the last 170 years in this country is the way we talk. Awesome. I think that's a good place to leave that. So thanks again for joining us for this episode of Every Day is Saturday. Matt and I genuinely love doing this. And so we thank you all for listening and making this a fun endeavor for us. Hopefully these chapters of Morgan's book, Psychology of Money, have continued to keep you entertained. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on these chapters. And so I'm hoping that continues to be the case. And so if this is your first time ever joining us, thanks for joining us for this episode. If you would, we would appreciate it. You can subscribe to Every Day is Saturday and be alerted every time we come out with a new episode. There's a couple of them a month. And if you've not done so already, tell your family, tell your friends. We're here a couple times a month, trying our best to entertain you in an educational way on all things finance. Some of it, episodes you would expect. Some of it, not so much.
Hopefully not.
But we definitely want to have fun while we're going through these. So thanks again for tuning into this episode of Every Day is Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see all of you next Saturday. See you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Every Day is Saturday. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Fiat Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.